We are back, folks. It's the fun half. We're going to open up the phone line, see how it goes. 646-257-3920. Retro the Robot. Is anyone working on an animation to go along with the Majority Report song? Well, I'm not sure, but we're grateful that like anybody makes any of this stuff for us, so I'm not going to
we don't
like,
solicit it.
get on it.
Yeah. Free labor.
Yeah, do it. No, it's I mean the song is just great. It's awesome in and of itself. Evan from Portland, in Jane McAlevy's honor, we just got our employer to agree to nearly open bargaining. All negotiations are being live streamed to members. Whoa.
I mean, really, if you're in a position in this economy where you are looking at unionizing, read everything that you can by Jane McAlevey.
Yes. Texas Left, I love that Ben is on this show. Great show today. Thank you. Prairie Fire Kowalski, to close with Ben Dixon on a lighter note, let him know that despite the impacts of inflation, I will continue to support him with the rotisserie chicken funding. If rotisserie chicken ever exceeds $10, I will march on Washington with the fury of John Brown. He will understand. Well, maybe, hopefully he listens to this later. Sorry, Kowalski, missed that earlier. MR13, hold the line, don't resign, and a giant fuck you to Elon and his incel gang of douchebags. Here.
I really enjoy unions calling out these twerps for having like lawyer dads and being like sort of freaks on social media. It's great.
Joanna, I just want to shout out to Ben in solidarity. So thankful for you, Rebecca. Majority Report, all the lefties in this circle. Thank you. Small D Democrat, there's got to be a significant amount of normal government employees who are huge Trump fans. Wonder how they'll handle it when they take the buyout, but Trump never pays it to them.
I mean, outside the FBI and like places like that,
yeah.
I don't know if people are supporters of Trump.
Because people who believe in government are going to be Democrats.
Aren't Republicans.
Yeah. Vermont Ben, Article 1 is clear and the Impoundment Control Act is law. Why isn't every GOP lawmaker and spokesperson not reminded of this every time they step in front of a camera? They're intimidated. The press. It's worked. All those lawsuits, frivolous lawsuits that Trump settled. Or they settled with Trump, I should say. That was essentially them bending the knee.
Yeah, I mean, Citations Needed did a story about how they're basically accepting the frame that it's about governmental efficiency, or whatever that means.
Right. Space London, can anyone please explain how our government is paralyzed to inaction by some guy just blocking the door?
Because it's not just some guy. Adam Tooze had a good episode about this, which is, like, people need to understand that Elon is going to take point on a lot of this stuff, but there is a appetite to destroy the administrative state that goes beyond just Bannon or Musk, but goes into Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or all these freaks too.
And the Heritage Foundation.
Of course.
We played that clip, that video essay yesterday that I really encourage people to check out. It shows that the Project 2025 project is joined at the hip with this like tech feudalist kind of agenda. The dismantling of the administrative state and the government for these tech billionaires to loot it and, you know, in Musk's vision, build a utopia in his image. They found a way, and it's not that hard because at the end of the day, it's just like more casino capitalism. They've married those two, and that's the Trump administration.
And, you know, again, like, people talk about, what's his name? Besant mentioned the Reagan attempt to it and the Clinton attempt to it. I don't want to sound like I'm always blaming Democrats, but when you go back and look at how Bill Clinton went after welfare reform, we're in basically in a 40-year period where politicians just take a butcher knife and walk up to the New Deal and take a big flank out of it. And at a certain point, like, we need to not just maintain things, but affirmatively reverse that trajectory.
Yeah, I think so too. And just wanted to plug this piece by Alex Shepard, who we've had on the show before and is a really good writer over at the New Republic. His first few paragraphs of this piece, I think, just like summarize this past 2 weeks pretty well. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, has seized control of the Treasury Department. He's deciding who the government pays and who it doesn't. The federal payment system he has access to contains the social security numbers and even the bank account information of nearly every American. It also has information about Musk's private sector competitors that he can now use for his own self-enrichment. Musk has given a handful of inexperienced young coders control over this sensitive system where they can, and reportedly have, started to mess with its code. At least one of them is not even old enough to drink. This hostile takeover of the finances of the United States This is a hostile takeover of the finances of the United States government. It's blatantly unconstitutional. It's a coup. It sounds like the treatment from a Gerard Butler action flick. That's not all. Trump and Musk have shut down the United States Agency for International Development and cut off nearly all foreign aid. This will have devastating consequences for global health, global democracy, and the future of American soft power. Speaking of, Trump has spent the early days of his presidency threatening 25% tariffs against Mexico and Canada for no real reason other than that he thinks it's a tool that worked more than a century ago will work now. It won't. Even if he doesn't end up enacting these tariffs, which would likely be a form of economic suicide, he has already likely damaged the future of any trade agreement between the U.S. and its closest allies. He has also pardoned over 1,000 violent insurrectionists and now seems ready to fire hundreds of FBI agents who helped prosecute them. But there's more. The administration is freezing funding for climate and infrastructure spending, despite numerous court orders. Trump just released a ton of water into California's Central Valley in a publicity stunt.
That couldn't possibly get to L.A.
All he's accomplished is screwing over farmers who will likely need that water in the summer. It did absolutely nothing to fight the mostly contained fires that devastated the state last month.
Because those drain into San Francisco.
Right. Well, he's so dumb, too. And they did it. Yep. His administration is waging an all-out war against trans people and seems on the verge of all but ending gender-affirming care for minors. As I write this, American planes are flying migrants to Guantanamo Bay, where they will be held in a concentration camp. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, supposedly one of the normal people in the administration, just reached an agreement with El Salvador where it will accept deportees of all nationalities, including Americans. I mean, people just should check out the full piece. It's great. But on that point, last night, a reporter from the Miami Herald came out with a story. This is just a tweet, but she broke this story. Clara Sophia Daly, I retweeted it, Bradley. I mean, it's not necessary that you put it up, but some MAGA idiots were claiming, oh, you're reporting this without any evidence. She's a reporter. She's an education reporter at the Miami Herald. Do you think that she didn't do her due diligence? But like, we're in the post-truth world, and all they need to do is throw out a smear, and then they feel okay. A middle school science teacher in Miami-Dade was detained by ICE. The Miami-Dade Teachers Union confirmed today that the teacher attended his immigration hearing and was detained. He has been in the U.S. since his youth and had DACA. He will likely be deported.
Revealing that these freaks would deny something like that when actually it's what they're calling for.
They say that he's a criminal for being a DACA recipient, for being a child that was a dreamer who is legally in the United States under that program. Legally. But you see how Sam did a really good job the other day of saying like what they're doing with these classifications. So if you're a member of a gang, we don't really need to prove it, but we'll say you're a member of the gang anyway. You're a terrorist. So we can put you in Guantanamo Bay. Gang members normally, they would be prosecuted within our own judicial system. But for immigrants, you're actually a terrorist. Okay, so that removes all their rights. And then they can go to Guantanamo Bay and be housed in this concentration camp. But they also need to house criminals in the concentration camp, right? So you got the terrorists in the concentration camp, and then you got the criminals. And for MAGA, the criminals are classified as anybody who is not a natural-born citizen in the United States. And even then, Trump's trying to target that with an executive order that, frankly, thankfully, has been blocked by 2 federal judges at this point, and we'll see how that process goes. But this is a local news report on immigration raids in the Denver area now. Now, you'll recall one of the apartment complexes that is highlighted here and was the subject of these deportations arrests is the Edge of Lowry. That was one of the apartment complexes that was falsely deemed by the slumlord that owns it to distract from the fact that he had been neglecting the tenants there. He claimed to a bunch of media sources and to the Republican politicians in the area that it had been taken over by Tren de Aragua, the gang. And that was a way for him to distract from what I just said.
It would totally not be a slum if that damn gang wasn't there,
right,
intimidating me.
And it was a mass attempt to deflect from his own malfeasance. And like, stories like with Target blaming crime for the closure of their stores in certain areas, and then you find out 6 months later that internally it was because they made bad business decisions and they weren't. It wasn't crime and shoplifting that was cutting into their profits. It was their own bad decisions. But it's easy to blame that, right? It was the same thing with this slumlord. Blame immigrants. Blame the hordes of people that you're supposed to be housing, because then people don't have to look into your own business practices. Punch down. That's conservatism. And so now this particular complex is back in the news. Here's Kyle Clark. He's done some good reporting, like one of the few local news reporters that seems to try to get it right.
He's a really, really good local news reporter. He also is, if we recall, was a very prudent and discerning questioner of Lauren Boebert at her congressional primary debate about the Beetlejuice incident and other things. He's really good at his job.
He is covering that this immigration bust. So this is his monologue and reporting on what's been happening.
This week's big immigration bust was a bust, if you judge it by the Fed's own goals and the results announced today by Fox News Channel. ICE agents said they were going after 100 members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua in Denver and Aurora yesterday. Now, while the feds refused to tell journalists just how many arrests they made and how many of them were TDA members, the Fox News reporter embedded with agents said they only made 30 arrests and just one was a TDA member. Fox News and the Trump administration are now blaming local media outlets for the lack of success.
It certainly felt like everybody knew this was coming, including the targets and the local media.
There were some leaks from local media that tipped off the local activists on the ground, and it made your jobs difficult.
We've already identified how this operation got leaked. I'll deal with that today.
Immigrant communities in Denver and Aurora have been expecting yesterday's raids ever since Donald Trump campaigned on a promise that he would start his mass deportation here. Many of the properties involved in the raids were also no-brainers. They're linked to CBZ Management, the landlords that made national headlines by claiming takeovers by the Venezuelan gang.
Ding, ding,
and
ding.
As those raids played out publicly for hours yesterday, community members and activists gathered to heckle agents from afar, shouting legal advice to the people inside apartments as agents went door to door asking people for their papers.
I was scolded by other members of the media that I was overlooking the will of the people in the area,
right?
By downplaying the dastardly gangs and the poor, helpless slumlord.
Well, it was Anna Kasparian.
Turns out that people actually think this is bullshit.
Yeah. It's like interesting. Was there any did you ever follow up to see if they retracted the story that they did that just basically regurgitated what the landlord said?
No, they doubled down and said that actually they were right about stuff without really fully addressing, say, the work that Jose, not a Jay, did in nailing them dead to rights.
Yeah, that video essay is phenomenal and shows how
Probably
much misinformation.
500,000 views by this point. Let me check.
Check over there if you want more about this Aurora gang story in particular. But They arrested one Tren de Aragua member. That was the figure that was given.
And it would have been more if it wasn't for those meddling kids.
And the dastardly media alerting people to this because...
We better collapse the media. We better just make it illegal to talk about ICE and stuff now.
Hey, Elon's on board or whatever. I mean, this is what the administration... Yeah, I mean, we got to see both sides here. And... by the way, this program is brought to you live from the Biden-Harris studios in Brooklyn. Anyway, let's keep going.
Advice to the people inside apartments as agents went door to door asking people for their papers. Today, Trump supporters Tom Homan threatened federal prosecutions for people he says are impeding their operations. Now, the feds say they were targeting violent criminals. We continue to ask just how many of the people arrested in Colorado yesterday were violent criminals, as opposed to people who had civil immigration violations and were picked up because they couldn't show papers. Homan suggested... That's
a nice distinction for a media professional to make and not just take the word of it from the fascist administration that they want to pander to.
More of this. Like, I've been screaming. The New York Times did have a piece where they, talked about the discrepancy in, like, I guess earlier this week, it was around 88,000 folks that ICE had said that they'd rounded up, and only a few dozen claims have been made via the ICE social media platform that those folks were criminals. So even if you take all of what ICE said and claimed on social media at face value, that these, 24, 36 people that they're highlighting, say even 50 are criminals, that's a pretty big gap with the 8,000. And I just said to you that a dreamer DACA recipient who's been in this country for most of his life and is a middle school teacher in Miami-Dade County was just rounded up by ICE. Criminals.
Who had civil immigration violations and were picked up because they couldn't show papers. Homan suggested today that the lack of success in this week's raids means more non-criminals will be arrested in the future.
We run these operations, the operation got leaked somehow, it makes us less successful. Again, when you leak an operation, it means more bad guys are not being arrested, which means more bad guys are walking the streets. So as we address that, you're going to see the arrests increase. As the aperture opens up beyond criminals, you're going to see more arrests.
Well, great job, Kyle Clark. That's right. And there's just so much, cruelty that's already being highlighted. Again, I feel like there's a gap with some of this reporting because people who are here without documentation are terrified of any attention that's going to be put on them right now. So that's part of what Homan and these fascists are relying on, is just like this idea that these are people who are already terrified of having their lives uprooted. So they're not going to speak to the press for the most part. And there was another report out of Austin in Cedar Park that there was a teenager who entered the U.S. through a legal pathway, detained by ICE, a teenager with no criminal record, seemingly rounded up in Austin.
Yeah, and when it comes to this sort of thing, all of this really does is help the Republicans attack sanctuary city laws, which are uncontroversially make cities less safe in a very basic way that, frankly, any child could understand, which is that if there are people committing crimes, regardless of their documented status, you should be able to tell the cops about it so that community isn't victimized by those people. And all this stuff adding to, and the GOP can't have that because two things that they can't really tolerate, which is a sane policy regarding non-citizens as part of society that don't need to be expelled using a giant military force called ICE. And what's the second one? B, safe cities. Safe cities are bad propaganda for the right wing. And that's why you have a whole bunch of people in media that want to inflate how unsafe exactly cities are. And so you have all this stuff focused on New York, blue state cities, because this is partisan. Never mind that, say, Kansas City, Missouri, or even Missouri, excluding Kansas City, has higher violent crime rates than the city that I'm in right now. But none of these people give a fuck about that. They don't give a fuck that there's a whole bunch of violence, particularly in the South, and like freedom of guns and like lack of development and all that sort of stuff. They only see this as a football to push reactionary politics.
And yeah, the city thing is really important too, because they attack, and usually it's also leaders of color that they're particularly targeting. I mean, you don't have to be Karen Bass's #1 fan to see that like a lot of the fixation on her from the right is about her gender and her race. And when they say big blue cities, that's what they mean. I mean, we played, that guy's name always escapes me, that podcaster who talked about tech Zionism yesterday.
Balaji Srinivasan, I think.
Balaji Srinivasan. He said that he was, because apparently he's ethnically conservative or non-liberal. I don't know
he's
how.
He's a gray.
He's a gray. So he's been ethnically cleansed from San Francisco. What does it mean to be a gray?
So he says the reds are like conservatives who want to go back to the 50s, and blues are like, you know, people who have pronouns in bio, and grays are the tech people. And I would just say the blues and the reds should team up on the grays.
Yeah. I want to ethnically cleanse those grays.
I think like it was, I think Jeb Bush said we should have a recession in Washington, D.C. And, you know, a lot of people pointed out like, well, D.C. is a very black city. That would be bad for particularly black people. But what he meant was basically what Republicans are doing right now, which is going after the administration. We should want to cut down venture capital to basically being a second afterthought.
You made a great point about the other day on Twitter about the being basically analogous to the trusts that were busted prior to the the Great Depression.
Yeah, Frederick Lewis Allen has a book from the 1930s or something like that, written during the height of the New Deal, when they thought we had turned back capitalism, free marketism for good, and it goes into all of the sort of like early 20th century. Consolidation, where people with too much money would give it to somebody like JP Morgan or whatever, and they would end up doing all of the investing for it. It's similar to private equity. The main difference is the robber barons of that time, like Morgan or Harriman, knew a lot more about the fundamental industries that they were monopolizing than any of these private equity freaks.
I mean, they were sociopaths, but like at the very least, they built things.
They knew how to build railroads.
Right. Now we just have, guys on ketamine and Adderall.
Building chatbots.
Right, like tinkering with algorithms and being antisocial. God, didn't think we'd long for the robber barons with a little bit more, like, respectability than these just weirdos.
Andrew Carnegie sitting at Davos with that guy who's trying to de-age himself.
Yeah.
And the Juicero CEO.
We are not the same. We are not the same.
And all these guys.
What do you build?
All these guys talking about philanthropy. Like, I imagine how much money it would cost to do like the Carnegie libraries across the entire country. None of these guys doing any of that shit.
Right, exactly. All right, guys, let's take a call really quickly, or we're gonna try. Moment of truth here. 603 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 603. Oh.
Oh, wait, what?
603? 603. Sorry, just stay on the line for a sec. Are you there? All right, I'm sorry. Hoping it's just I don't hear it now. Oh, they hear her, Kowalski says. Oh. Okay. We can't hear you. So the callers can hear the call, but we can't hear it. So I'm sorry, we got to hang up. Okay. We can't.
Yeah.
We're so sorry. Okay, I'm sorry everybody for on the line. We can't take calls today because we just we're having a technical issue. God. So I'm sorry. We almost fixed it, but we'll have it ready. It's a Dave from Jamaica. We can hear you, but we can't. But they can't. They can hear us. We can't hear them. So we'll figure it out on Monday, guys. I'm sorry. We're going to have to hang up on the phones. And it seems like on YouTube they can't hear either. So we're just having an issue of getting the phones. But we're narrowing down the issue.
Check 1, 2.
No, I can hear you. Don't worry about it, Matt. Yeah, we gotta.
Try one.
Okay, he's trying one thing. I'll read some IMs as we do it, but everyone's hanging up now, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So am I.
it's just don't worry. I'm sorry, guys. Allie from New Hampshire. Hi, I was 603. I'm sorry, Allie. Call in on Monday, but maybe I am what you wanted to say if you'd like, if you can, and then we will respond to it. Edward Gregorian says Doge got into the phone systems.
Yeah, Sam went Doge mode on the phone.
Yeah, he really did. He went and tinkered in with the treasury. The phone system. Hack all the things. ICE don't give an F about your papers. Exactly. Hack all the things also says people with documentation are terrified also. Anarcho-capitalists love to see TYT giving cover for ICE raids through lies about immigrants, true poly-market populism.
And against the thing that they actually want. Like, it does not make people safer to attack sanctuary laws. It just doesn't.
Right.
Like, there's a reason police departments accepted them as part of their standard course of business. And it's, not because they want to replace, white people.
Right. Aesop's foibles. I saw when an ICE raid in Aurora did not turn up the Venezuelan gang. Officials blame corruption and people letting them know. Right, we did just play that, so maybe that was prior to when we played that video. Lennon from Simbursk. Hey guys, I know you have an incredible amount of news to cover, but do you have anyone or do you plan to have anyone on about the new regime in Syria? Maybe less important than other news, but I'm appalled at how the world is ignoring their crimes. Well, we should get to that. It's doing this today. Like, I have this anxiety like before we're going live because Sam's not in and he sometimes, he's been doing this for longer. So I rely on him to have his finger on the pulse of stories I may miss. And I'm just like, I could be missing a massive, we're doing our best, but
yeah. I mean, the serious stuff obviously very unsettled now. I think the main thing that can be said from a political standpoint is countries like us or Germany that have accepted a lot amount of Syrian refugees and are now hurrying to boot them out because, oh, look, Assad's gone. You can leave our country now, which is what Alternative for Germany is doing. Stuff like that is sick.
Yeah. Scary Mountain Wizard. The entire conversation is an example of what people mean when they say both parties are fundamentally the same. Same donors, same capitulation to capitalism. Dems just wave a rainbow flag. Vote harm reduction, absolutely, but know who you're voting for and support. I hear what you're saying. You know me. I think that's a little bit simplistic. But
they're very different parties. I think it's right that they want the same thing, but the way that our political and elites are reacting to a Republican popular vote victory is, I think, really pronounced, right. And they've been aching for it for a long time.
Snarkanorsky, the Democrats need a media blitz. Short videos showing Elon and his team of greasy beavesies saying these guys have your social security information. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing at the very least like some people there's beginning to be some level of competence in combating this. Did you want to play something, Matt?
I like this James Tallarico thing, but what was the IM you were just responding to? I think I had something on that.
It was about I just lost it. Democrats and that they need to go on a media blitz.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the one thing I think is get other businesses upset about this because that's who the government listens to. And if it's how many people Elon is competitive with, you want him having access to all of those disclosures about your businesses having one-sided, like Sam Altman, grow a spine, you little pussy. You're going to blow it all if you don't step up for yourself. Stop bending the knee.
Hyping up Sam Altman over here. It was a school choice thing you wanted?
Yeah,
okay.
I like this.
So here's a Texas State Representative, James Tallarico, and he went on social media. He's a Democrat. And he talked about how to combat these school choice efforts. This is like especially important because Trump is trying to eliminate the Department of Education. We're in an all-out, very scary moment, and the Department of Education, just to give people the context on this, is an outgrowth of the civil rights movement and of like the end of slavery as well. The idea that to make black people full citizens in this country, we have to give them access to a public education system. And eventually we integrated, not that well, but there were attempts, opposed by one Joe Biden, by the way. If you want to go back into those records, that little girl was me. People may remember that. But it really was I mean, he's been in politics that long. Oh, don't get me started on Biden. Anyway, like, attempts to basically privatize education and gut the Department of Education is a way to make it so that access to our educational institutions is there for the elite and the wealthy, and the rest of us have to get by and probably get indoctrinated by some, like, I don't know, charter school or religious teachings in our education. And the Department of Education is especially important too for states that, you know, blue states will probably be okay, but red states, they rely on federal funding to subsidize, particularly in poorer areas, and for things like disability access for kids that may have a disability. Their education will be gutted if the federal programs go away. So that's a bit of a tangent, but Matt, this is you know a little bit more about this story.
Yeah, this is James Tallarico, and I don't think he's a socialist. Probably doesn't share my politics entirely. He is a really good politician and speaker, and I think with coming from a type of place that I think we need to hear people like James, Texans, defending public school, and this is a winnable battle. Texans love public school. Where do you think the football games are played?
Right.
And we talked about this with my friend Chris Leal. I sat in that chair doing this interview like 4 years ago or something like that, whenever it was. All this CRT, anti-DEI, the migrants in school stuff is meant to chisel away support for those public schools. And I just thought this was really well put by James here.
Greg Abbott is selling this private school voucher scam by calling it school choice. But it's not school choice. It's the school's choice, because private schools can deny admission to any kid for any reason they want. So how is it choice when the private school has all the power? How is it choice when a majority of counties in the state of Texas don't have a single private school in them? How is it choice when private schools don't have to provide transportation or special education services? And how is it choice when the voucher doesn't even cover the full cost at most private schools in Texas? If you gave my former students on the west side of San Antonio a $10,000 voucher, there's still no way they could afford a $20,000 a year private school.
Yep.
But here's the catch. The wealthy parent who is already sending their kid to a $20,000 a year private school is about to get a $10,000 discount, a $10,000 coupon at our expense. Vouchers are welfare for the wealthy. And by taking money out of our public schools and giving it to wealthy parents who don't need it, vouchers would be a massive, historic transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top. And the last thing I'll say, there are a lot of self-proclaimed Christians pushing these voucher scams. I can't think of anything more un-Christian than stealing from the poor to give to the rich.
Ooh, so when is Cornyn up?
I know. This is the second clip I've seen from Tallarico where he, especially when he gets biblical, because I take it he is a believer, and it makes me want to go to church.
Andy Bashir does that too, right? Like invokes religion in a more egalitarian way, and it's beautiful. Like Bashir is also somebody who's really defended public schools.
But the way he put that is so clear, which is
Exactly.
like, oh, a voucher that my kid could go to a private school. Okay, let me do the math on that. $10,000. That's very generous. Oh, it's a $20,000 tuition. We are subsidizing rich people to be more and more alien from everyone else.
Yeah, right. I mean, he put it incredibly clearly. And it's just a real shame, frankly, that the Democratic Party spent, I don't know, the last like 10 and 15 years engaging with this school voucher and school choice thing. It was
Arnie Duncan
yeah.
was like the point man under Obama pushing all this stuff.
I mean, I know it as well. Look, I went to private school, right? And I wouldn't send my kids to private school now. I wouldn't have the means to. But also, like back, I had a wonderful, wonderful education, but it also should not just be for people who can afford to go. And I'm in principle against it now for that very reason, because all of those resources that are going towards private institutions should be going to public ones to lift everybody up. But we already have these private schools. The voucher system just involves the government in extracting that money towards those private institutions as well. So you already have like this private pool of money going to private schools that should be going to like lifting up everybody. And then this just takes an entirely different, like entire step further.
Yeah, and North Dakota, it's fascinating. There's this graph here, like North Dakota, where I'm from, probably the best upward mobility of any state in this country, in terms of if you came from low income, your chances of being a higher income than your parents is greatest in North Dakota. It's one of the only states that approaches Canada's level of that American dreamness. The rest of America is extremely unequal, and a huge part of that is because there is not a whole lot of private schools in North Dakota. There's not any. It's just there's some Catholic schools that kind of do the same thing, that tend to be a little bit more wealthier and segregated. But ultimately, that's the way to lift everyone. And when you let people opt out of that, it really like ruins society. It's really bad for any kind of inequality or that sort of thing.
And most of the countries, particularly like the Nordic countries that rate so highly in education, they either have zero private schools or like they're incredibly marginal because they put those resources towards like broadly educating the population. And I guess that's where I was going with the New Jersey thing. It was really prominent. Cory Booker was a big part of it. In New Jersey, this like school choice thing, and it's massive malpractice because in reality it's just because of Jersey and other states like this, their proximity to Wall Street, and there were a lot of Wall Street investors that were getting in on the idea of financializing our education and that were very excited about this. And it encourages me to see Democrats in red states like Texas and then Bashir in Kentucky holding the line, because hopefully it makes it more untenable for those kinds of politics within the Democratic Party in other areas of the country. Garrett from Nova, I went to private elementary and middle school in Minnesota and then public high school in Tennessee. I did the reverse. I was high school or a little bit of middle school. And then public high school in Tennessee. My kids will all be in public schools and we are going to advocate as fuck to ensure public schools are properly researched. Here. Same. Alex from Denver, let me just say that Ryan Clark is just as good and consistent as he appears when you cover him, if not more so. We're so lucky to have him in Denver. I mean, just an oasis in our local news.
Didn't he go after Boebert or something like that?
Yeah. Why I Write the Right says 5-year plan, become a prolific IMer, start a YouTube channel under the same name. Why I Write the Right. Call in on a Thursday when Matt is feeling feisty. Say something stupid. Have him go off on me. Make a YouTube video about how all leftists are mean. Get TYT contract profits. Yeah, that might work out for you. Gold Rush John, Tallarico's delivery is reminiscent of Anthony Yellisnick, and I'm here for it.
I don't get that reference.
Me neither.
Anthony Jeselnik's a stand-up comedian.
See, I don't know who that is.
Okay. I don't quite follow that comparison, but that's interesting. All I know is Anthony Jeselnik from is the Shark Party joke.
I went with the Y for the J because I didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
I would only say I can kind of see it, but Jeselnik is one of like in terms of his comedy, one of like the cruelest, most cynical comics on the planet. So very different material from.
For sure.
I love him though. He's very, very funny.
Yeah, that's the thing is I don't want to. Maybe he's done things I haven't seen. I think he's genuinely. He had this joke, which is I thought kind of funny, which is he would do a shark party every time someone got eaten by a shark, just kind of show how rare it is.
Yeah.
But then he had to like update the joke because the media kept going to the families of the victims of the sharks to say like, and it's like, no, the media, like you're the ones doing that. They
like
don't
elevating
need
the fear
you.
of sharks.
Yeah,
Yes.
they don't. That family doesn't need you to go say, "Hey, what about this American comedian?"
I mean, if it bleeds, it leads, right?
But he also has like tells comedians to shut up about PC culture and stuff like that too. I'm pretty sure.
Well, he's cool in my book then. A new Midwesterner. President Musk blocked $2 billion in infrastructure bill funds that has not gone out to states yet to fill gaps in EV charging hubs. Are they just going to keep blocking different funding pools until one of these cases goes to court? Pretty much. I mean, Yarvin says don't care about the courts. And that's what Musk is following. Because he's actually not a deep thinker in any way. He's just like working backwards from this stupid tech bro philosophy. What Now says, thank you all for what you do. We are living in the dark timeline, but listening to this show makes me feel connected to a community of people trying to make a better future. Sometimes it's hard to find that locally. I hear that.
Media can help bring about imagined communities.
Yeah.
I have this Jesselnick thing if we want to watch.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I can just go to it there.
People want comedy to be dangerous. I want comedy to be dangerous. And if you can't get in trouble, it's not dangerous.
Right.
So complaining about cancel culture is just saying you want to take all of the danger out of it and you want it to be easy for you.
Right.
Then I think as soon as I say it, people cheer.
Yeah.
And this journalist was like, why do you think people are cheering? Do you think they believe you that you're about to talk about cancel culture? Do you think they like are sick of cancel culture? And I'm like, no. They're way more savvy than that. They've seen the first 40 minutes of the special. They know I'm not suddenly turning into Ricky Gervais.
Right.
Like they get that I'm about to subvert this in some way.
Yeah.
But I hate people complaining about cancel culture. I hate comics complaining in general. It's the second comedy boom. It's not going anywhere. People are making more money than ever before. And Dave Chappelle, who's won every award in the world, is complaining that cancel culture is making his job harder. It's like, your job shouldn't be easy. If you're going to make that much fucking money, like, hey, maybe it should be a little hard. I got no issue with that.
Nice. I like him. There's a lot of really cool comedians, like also doing different things, like more experimental stuff. Like that guy, gosh, he's had such a really funny special on HBO. No.
Bargatze?
What? No.
Nate Bargatze?
No.
That's the only guy I've watched in a while.
Gosh, it's really gonna piss
Louis
me off.
CK?
No. People in the tiny things or something like that. People are gonna be able to figure. Stavi, I love.
Of course.
People are gonna figure it out. The anti-corporatist says in Finland, private school is illegal, so the kids of the no, not Tim and Eric. Stop it. In private school, Finland, private school is illegal. So the kids of the richest, most politely well-connected people go the same as everybody else. And for years, they had the highest ranked schools in the world. Also, what?
Let me just quote Hillary Clinton. Do you want Donald Trump's kids getting free public education?
Exactly. Right. Also, when you're done with high school in Finland, if I remember correctly, you take a test to either go to university or trade school as appropriate. And not only is it fully paid for, so are your meals, accommodations, and the stipends, so you don't have to work a part-time job or something. They figure your students, your job is to learn. Funny how those people go out to be a benefit to society. Julio Torres, yes, thank you. Julio Torres, really funny. Like, I mean, even Hannah Einbender's special is a little experimental, and like, there's a lot of really interesting, funny people who aren't just like a part of the comedy mothership. And frankly, those are the folks that are pushing the boundaries of what stand-up even looks like.
But also sort of fly in the face of like, no one can be funny anymore. It's like, yeah, you can be funny if you try to be funny.
Yeah.
Airing your grievances isn't necessarily funny if it's, not funny.
Yes. The stand-up special is called My Favorite Shapes. Yes. It's great. Let's do some clips here. What did I want to get to? Ben Shapiro. Let's do 4 and 5. So Ben Shapiro is weighing in on Donald Trump's plans to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. Here he is. Guess, actually, let's just pull up his tweet from 2010 as a primer, a little appetizer. So in case you were confused about where Ben Shapiro stands on this issue, he is a unrepentant racist.
Well, I mean, half repentant. This tweet, Israelis like to build. Arabs.
They just destroyed the entire Gaza Strip.
Who gave them the money to build? Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage. This is not a difficult issue. This and hashtag settlements rock. So they're that hashtag encouraging war crimes, which is what the settlements are. You can't take land that was conquered. This is one of the tweets that he put in his "I'm sorry for bad things I did in the past" document that he had on his website for a while, and then he put it behind a paywall, along with him saying, what's that guy's name from Iowa, Steve King, isn't a racist, and people are being woke by calling him one.
Well, maybe he self-reflected. I mean, if he did apologize at one point for saying hashtag settlements rock, and that Arabs like to bomb things and live in open sewage, maybe he's reevaluated.
President Trump's most audacious move has been his attempt to solve the situation in Gaza by allowing people who are in a rubble-strewn area a way out so that the Gaza Strip can then be rebuilt as basically Monte Carlo on the Mediterranean. Yeah, everybody who is opposing this, everybody who's yelling about this, their solution is no solution. Their solution, of course, is to simply allow the rebuilding of Hamasistan in the Gaza Strip.
Right,
and the suffering of...
Okay, so your solution is ethnic cleansing, and you talk about, it's rubble. They're doing exactly what the Netanyahu, Likud playbook is, well, it's destroyed. They can't live there. Who destroyed it? So Ben Shapiro cheered on the destruction of the Gaza Strip for a year and a half. Over 90% of the homes destroyed. Hundreds of thousands. We still don't know the true figures, but it's certainly over the Lancet estimate at this point of 180,000 Palestinians, and somewhere in between the deficit that Trump blurted out in that press conference, which would have indicated 500,000. It's somewhere around in between those two ranges. Ben Shapiro cheered on that wholesale slaughter, that genocide. And now that basically they've done enough and left the hostages. Didn't Yoav Gallant just admit this? That the Israeli government prolonged the war in Gaza when they could have gotten the hostages back, because basically they wanted to make Gaza, they needed more time to make Gaza uninhabitable so that they could do the ethnic cleansing that Shapiro says is the only solution. We want to add a different word before solution?
Yeah, no, Ben wants to find a solution for Palestinians. He will happily use, he knows his job when the time comes, whenever Israel starts massacring, is to justify it. And it's interesting to see some of the people in his stable, probably pretty cynically, probably with an eye toward contract negotiations, try to buck it. Or you have people like Dave Smith that are purport to be critics of Israel that did the rounds a little bit last year. Everyone folding in, and this is what actually is spoken for by the right wing.
Simply allow the rebuilding of Hamasistan in the Gaza Strip and the suffering of the people who live there for decades on end.
That's also what I want to say. Sorry. No, we do actually have a solution. Don't pretend that we don't. One democratic state from the river to the sea. The reality that already exists, the 3 million Palestinians that are in the ghetto of the West Bank, that's land is being encroached upon on a daily basis, that is controlled by Israel. You got to make them citizens. You got to make them citizens. And then the now reduced number due to genocide in Gaza, the 1.7 or 1.8 million people that may still be alive, their lives forever just tarnished by the carnage and the trauma of what they've witnessed, they also have to be full citizens too. And damn, your demographic majority may not be that pronounced, but sorry, you got to go by the way of South Africa, and apartheid is wrong. Deal with it. So when you pretend we don't have solutions, we do. You just don't like it. Your solution is the final solution.
And in the meantime, in the time preceding eventual one-state sort of anti-apartheid regime, which we can all dream about. How about who gets to govern the Palestinians is whoever the Palestinians vote for, even if that is Hamas. Aaron Rupar tweeted this out last May. I have no problem saying Palestine. I support a two-state solution. The problem is getting there. Who is going to govern Gaza? Certainly not Hamas. And I also support Israel's right to exist. So that is really more than October 7th. It is, they don't like the groups. And before it was Hamas, it was the PLO. Whoever is organized to oppose Israel's land grabbing and genocide will be justifiably, to all these Zionists, killed, and we'll open up war to get rid of them. It's not politics, because you always hear about this stuff. Elections have consequences. The consequence for the last election that Palestinians held was that Israel said, oh, you can't do it like that. We're going to try to coup you all, and then we're going to occupy you.
Yeah. Rashida Tlaib tweeted this in response to what Trump did. Palestinians aren't going anywhere. The president can only spew this fanatical bullshit because of bipartisan support in Congress for funding genocide and ethnic cleansing. It's time for my two-state solution colleagues to speak up. I was happy to see her say that because Matt and I think have both been kind of pushing this, like, when are there going to be squad members that talk about the reality of what is actually happening? It's not, a two-state solution was always a stalling tactic for Israel to expand its territory. We have to meet this moment with what is true, which is that there already is a one-state reality, and Palestinians live in subjugation under that one-state reality. And so I appreciated, as always, Rashida Tlaib leading the way on this issue. But let's keep going.
The Strip and the suffering of the people who live there for decades on end while they rebuild nothing with no money and no jobs. That is their solution. Trump is proposing an alternative. He is also making clear that contra the sort of idiotic opinion that America is going to send troops to do this. No, we're not. And we shouldn't.
Wait.
Obviously, we shouldn't be taking in refugees from this area, nor should we be sending them.
He did. He suggested it first, but he walked it back.
It came out of nowhere. It wasn't anywhere before one person said that, and it was Donald Trump who said that. And Bibi loved it. So if it's so idiotic, I mean.
Yeah, Trump blurted it out, but he's got a retcon.
We shouldn't. Obviously, we shouldn't be taking in refugees from this area, nor should we be sending American troops to this area. Of course, of course. Caroline Leavitt of the White House, she was asked about this by members of the media. About, are you risking American lives in Gaza? And she's like, what are you even talking about?
I'm 27.
Is it worth risking the life of a single U.S. Marine to turn the Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East?
Phil, I'm not sure why you're asking me that question, because I've already said the president has not committed to sending Marines or any boots on the ground in Gaza.
Sorry.
Okay, so.
He didn't commit to never doing it, which was a follow-up to that question. I don't know why they couldn't find time for it in Ben Shapiro's thing, but she was explicitly asked, like, okay, so is he ruling it out? I don't know. We'll get back on.
I don't know why I have to keep doing this again, responding to the words of the president as the presidential spokesperson. I mean, like, you're so irrational. Stop putting this upon me.
Sending Marines or any boots on the ground in Gaza.
Okay, so. Again, they made that clear. Trump himself made that clear this morning. He put out a statement, quote, the Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. The Palestinians, people like Chuck Schumer, I don't know what that means, but I'm for it, would have already been resettled in far safer and more beautiful communities with new and modern homes in the region. They would actually have a chance to be happy, safe, and free. The U.S., working with great development teams from all over the world, would slowly and carefully begin the construction of what would become one of the greatest and most spectacular developments of its kind on Earth. No soldiers by the U.S. would be needed. Stability for the region would reign. Again, President Trump sees this as a real estate project. He's a real estate guy. What he is basically saying is Israel should clear the ground. People who want to leave should be allowed to get out and go live somewhere that is not, in fact, a hellhole run by Hamas. And then the United States will basically take the thing
they can't be honest. Yep. The people given opportunity allowed to leave, they want to stay there, you fucking rabid Zionist. They want to stay in the land. You want to expel them out.
And notice how he laughs about the joke, like the forced laughter about the joke about calling Schumer a Palestinian, which Trump has repeatedly done, referring to Palestinian as a slur. because he can't, as a non-Jewish person, call Schumer a bad Jew. But that's why, for mildly criticizing Netanyahu. But Trump feels like he can't say it. But Ben Shapiro thinks it's funny because that's how he feels about anybody who is Jewish who doesn't support Israel and isn't a Zionist.
Any confirmed Zionist is this much of a bigot, and actually even the one that says Israelis like to build, Arabs like to live in sewage.
Right,
That's Zionism.
And apparently, if you are repulsed by that, you're the bigot in Ben Shapiro's worldview. You're the anti-Semite.
Oh yeah, Uncle Sam is going to protect the little snowflakes that listen to Ben Shapiro across college campuses, make sure they aren't exposed to any kind of counter messaging about the propaganda that they have been abused with by Zionist education throughout their childhood.
And
You talk about safe spaces. The one place that we cannot have that is people who were abused with, frankly, overly emphasizing trauma and how sick the world is. Look, I understand that the Holocaust takes up a big spot in people's historical memory. Using it to forward a ethno-nationalist fascist colony has been a fucking disaster, and everyone can see it now.
And it's a disgrace to the memory of the Holocaust to commit genocide in the name of the Holocaust. I mean, I don't know how we have to, how clear we have to be.
Yakov Rivkin, Enemies from Within, a book about Jewish resistance to Zionism, is one that I think more and more people should check out.
Peter Beinart has a new book out, and hopefully we have him on soon where he talks about, the reaction to this genocide as a Jewish person, and he speaks about it. He speaks. I mean, look, you can. There are many Jewish historians and intellectuals who speak out about this, but Ben Shapiro would say that they're bad Jews because they don't support genocide. And the other I had another point. Again, my brain's falling apart. Maybe when Trump's Truth Social comes up, it'll remind me. Keep going. Just go back 10 seconds. Yeah.
Project. He's a real estate guy. What he's basically saying is Israel should clear the ground. People who want to leave should be allowed to get out and go live somewhere that is not, in fact, a hellhole run by Hamas. And then the United States will basically take the thing that's good about the area, meaning the beachfront property, and turn it into something nice as a good investment.
Something nice.
He's basically going to syndicate a real estate deal in Gaza, is the thing that Trump is saying. Not that he's going to pour 20,000 American troops, God forbid, into the Gaza Strip in order to clear out Hamas. He's saying that's Israel's job. Let Israel do its job.
Oh, that's
and finish off Hamas.
Let it do.
And then
let them
give
do
people
its job.
who've been living in the
done.
worst.
We're good. That was what I wanted to say. Is Shapiro is working overtime to maintain this fiction that Trump is anti-war, because that is what some of his new fans say they like about him.
Because
so he's
the Democrats abandoned that shit.
Right. So he's doing PR for it. How long is that going to last? It's so desperate. And
the guy who said he was going to end the Ukraine-Russia thing by telling Vladimir Putin to knock it off, but instead said, maybe we should do some more conscription and give us some of your minerals.
Right. Right.
If you want these missiles to keep coming.
Could we just really quickly listen to what Trump said again?
Yeah.
Because I want you to just listen to it here to consider how Shapiro is so adamant saying that no personnel from America would possibly be needed in Gaza based off of what Trump and his press secretary said.
Yeah, let's listen to Trump's own words to see if everyone's being hysterical.
And they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful.
Israel will kill you.
So to be clear, can the United States remotely remove unexplode bombs and remove demolished buildings? Can the United States rebuild physical structures remotely? Is that possible?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that reporter in the White House press briefing room the dumbest person on the planet for asking how this is going to happen with through a computer screen or a drone? I guess
they're just lying and trying to do whatever they want. It's the same thing with the Treasury. They're lying about these Doge freaks having access to the Treasury because they don't want to spook the market, and they're just going to be like, screw you. So everyone's got to keep leaking, keep leaking. And on Shapiro, the dude just defended Elon Musk doing a Nazi salute. You're done with your credibility about anti-Semitism.
I mean, he was a defender of Stephen King. Not the horror director, Steve King, the Iowa white supremacist representative.
Under the Dome is a good book.
Who,
no, Steve King, who literally said white national. I don't see the problem with the term white nationalist.
Who, by the way, if that scandal happened today, there's no chance he would have resigned.
Yeah, he'd still be in Congress.
He'd still be in Congress. He's probably thinking like, oh, I really, really miss my time.
The book I mentioned, anybody who wants to read it, is A Threat from Within, A Century of Jewish Opposition to Zionism by Yaakov Rabkin. People should read that and compare it to... they might understand that Ben Shapiro is basically an overgrown... as Einstein said about the Betar youth movement, these are basically what the Hitler Youth is for our people.
Yep. Shargun says Ben Shapiro is an emotional and irrational dweeb who internalized European anti-Semitism. He's also a racist because these bigotries usually travel together. Henry Ford was also a profoundly racist person in addition to supporting Hitler.
Bibi Netanyahu's son has been in Florida this entire time, doing edgelord shit online with like Pepe frogs and stuff like that.
Jay Tingle, Shapiro is apparently unaware that we already have a Monte Carlo of the Riviera. It's called Monte Carlo. John from Teberg, why are in they a rubble-strewn area, Ben? Fucking dweeb. I hate this guy as much as it's possible to hate someone you've never met. MR13 is Trump's son's full name, Robber Baron. Nice. Sick, yes. Love it. Tater Tot, petition to include a stand-up segment on Fun Half Fridays where the crew picks fun clips to play. We need laughs. Fair enough. We should have some laughs. What do we have here on sound?
Crowder's...
yeah, let's do it.
The Crowder's CEO?
Yeah. So we've been kind of, just using this Crowder deposition as a bit of levity on in the Fun Half.
The algorithm put this one on my YouTube front page.
So... tell us a little bit about this, Matt. This is the Mug Club CEO, Gerald Morgan.
Yeah, Gerald. People might know him from being like the somehow the most charisma-less member of Louder with Crowder. But he has a lot of airtime now that like half of the people who used to work on Crowder have left under and hate Steven now. Like pick a random person who's not there anymore and look at what he's made. Like Dave Landau.
Yeah.
Landau, not gay Jared.
I mean, they accused
Sven
him
Computer.
Sven Computer, yep.
like a toxic workplace,
100%.
including putting his genitalia repeatedly on one of his male employees.
But Gerald is sort of the Ghislaine of the Louder with Crowder.
The Ed McMahon to Crowder.
He's there to say it's actually funny if Steven puts his balls on your shoulder. This is just how we unwind. It turns out that the Louder with Crowder team as a whole is pretty brain dead when it comes to things like fascism and white supremacy. Mm-hmm. And they got sued because they do what they always do whenever there's a gun violence in this country. You know, the guy who has a gun on his desk saying it's good that people buy so many guns. They obscure it by saying, oh, are we sure the shooter wasn't trans? Or are we sure the shooter wasn't Latino or something like that? Well, in this case, they saw the name and they picked they saw some other kind of weirdo, like kind of media adjacent person say, oh, it's this Spanish person. And they said, well, clearly they're lying about it being a white supremacist. Come to find that it was someone with from a Latino background who had SS tattoos and right-wing death squad stuff all over. So very clearly a Nazi, because it turns out that even if you're from, say, your ancestors come from Southern Europe and colonized and came over in the United States of America, or Latin America, they can still be fascist and white supremacists because it's really about the settler versus the indigenous folks. So anyway, long story short, here's
well, can I just give a little more context before we do it? Because like the Crowder's coverage of it, and Tim Pool too, which is what I called him out on about the show that got him so upset with the whoopsie and all, like, or the freak out that he had, was that all of the mainstream press reported this guy's identity for like in a 2-day gap. And it confirmed that he had tattoos of a swastika and the SS lightning bolt, and he was tied to neo-Nazi movements. And he had a social media account where he had rants about women and black people. The New York Times had reported it at the time. But they were looking for an alternative story. And so that's when this came up. And that's why this lawsuit is going forward, because there were already many credible media sources that had identified him. But they came up with a different idea.
Well, because their fundamental narrative, which is that the media is lying to make white people look bad, is actually, turns out, massive bullshit by hysterical Nazis like these idiots, and dumb Nazis like these idiots. Here they go.
Okay. So since this all unfolded over the past 15 months, you've seen photos of the actual shooter, correct?
I don't know that I have.
So in preparing for this deposition, you didn't take any time to look up who the actual shooter was?
I did not.
Sure.
Okay. So if I were to represent to you that the actual shooter was in fact Hispanic, would you have any reason to disagree with that?
No, the pictures on the ground at the scene showed that, I think, as well.
Okay. So you're aware that the actual shooter had tattoos of a swastika and SS lightning bolts?
I saw pictures of that immediately following, but not at the time of publication.
So at some point after that?
Yes.
Okay. And you understand that those symbols are associated with Nazism and white supremacy?
Yes.
So the company understood that Hispanic people can also be neo-Nazis or white supremacists?
Objection form.
I would disagree. I don't know that we understood that. I think that was part of the confusion.
You understand that now, though?
Objection form.
I still think I would be surprised.
Okay, so just to summarize real quick, your testimony is that you understand that the actual shooter was Hispanic, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that he also had tattoos of a swastika and SS lightning bolts, correct?
Correct.
And that those symbols are associated with Nazism and white supremacy, right?
Correct.
So you understand that Hispanic people can also be neo-Nazis or white supremacists.
Objection form.
Right?
I understand that they can have the tattoos. I don't know.
Oh, it's aesthetic.
This
Can
person
you
had
pause
those
it? I'm
tattoos.
sorry. This is so good. Okay. So there were, Jewish collaborators with the Nazis. There were some,
Capos, yeah.
Right. And even before, of course, like the extermination began, there were some Jewish people that were on board with the movement because of, say, it's like anti-communism.
That book I just mentioned, Threat from Within, Jabotinsky. Yep. Einstein and other folks said this is their base. They call them out for partnering with Nazism.
So if you had like kind of any basic understanding of history, you could just draw to that example. Like one of the most extreme examples, and people are very familiar with, rightly so, the incredible, horrific crime of the Holocaust in our country. That's an example right there. But he's basically saying that he doesn't think that that is legitimate. Like, it's almost identical.
These freaks, all of his audience, loves Pinochet memes. What complexion do you think Augusto Pinochet was? Like, whiteness, Americans are so, this is the thing, is Americans are very stupid about how artificial and constructed whiteness is. Mm-hmm. A lot of these guys think that it's like Northern Europeans or something. So like, even if you come from an Italian background or Spain, for instance, history of fascism there. You're like not really white. You're like kind of pretending and stealing white valor, and that is just a ridiculous view. That's not only is that ridiculous to anybody who understands the history of like racism or settler or colonial societies, that's ridiculous to even fascists in South America.
There is a far-right fascist leader of one of the most populous countries on the planet right now, India. If not the most populous.
And they do swastika stuff all the time over there.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes.
I don't know if it's Modi's specific people, but there's like...
Modi admired the Nazis in many ways. Anyway, I mean, there's so many examples, but they are race essentialists, and so they think about race in an essential way.
But the real thing is whiteness is a political construct.
I understand that they can have the tattoos. I don't know why this person had those tattoos or what other actions they had that would have confirmed that.
Maybe they're faking it.
I see. So is there any other meaning to having a swastika tattoo or SS lightning bolts? Somebody tattoos that on themselves?
No, I don't think so. It's a pretty bold step.
Yeah, deductive reasoning, Gerald.
Yeah. God, we need more critical thinking in schools.
So the possibility that the shooter was actually a Hispanic neo-Nazi or Hispanic white supremacist is not something the company considered before it published my client's photo linking him to the shooting?
I think we were all a little surprised by that claim.
I understand. But is that something the company considered before it published the photo?
I don't believe so. I think it surprised us that claim was being made by the media.
What?
Okay. Is it the company's understanding that some Hispanic people consider themselves white, some do not, therefore Hispanic people can also be white supremacists?
Objection form.
I don't know what Hispanic people consider themselves potentially as it relates to this. I'm unsure.
Have you ever filled out a form somewhere where they ask you to identify your race, and it'll say something like Asian, African American, and then it gets to
ethnicity,
white, and then there's like a subcategory where it says Hispanic or non-Hispanic?
Yes.
You ever seen that?
I have, yes.
So you can be a white Hispanic?
Objection form. Mr. Adler, what topic does this fall under? Because I'm not sure how the shooter identifies as relevant to any of the topics.
How is it not?
But if you
I'm
can
not asking
explain, I'm happy to let it continue.
I'm sorry?
I said, if you can explain to me how that fits under one of these topics, I'm happy to let it continue. I just don't know how that's relevant here.
Because you're stupid.
Last question anyway. So can you please answer it?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. I gave you an example. You said, yes, you've seen that on a form where a person can check Hispanic and they can check white or non-white. So would you agree?
Are you saying the white or non-white is a subsection of the Hispanic on the form? Is that how you're laying it out?
No, white or Hispanic, non-Hispanic. So there are Hispanic people who consider themselves white.
Oh my God.
Form, right?
Objection form.
That's not what I was saying yes to. I was saying yes to seeing a form that has Hispanic and then white and black. You said non-Hispanic. I thought it was another category. I didn't know if it was a subset of another category. I really don't know if Hispanics consider themselves to be white in some cases or not.
But you just said you know that on the form. Okay. I mean, Jesus, it's painful. He's being purposefully obtuse, obviously.
Well, it's an ideological, let's call it ideological retardation, which is that he can't admit that whiteness is malleable. It's not just skin tone. It is actually a political construct of like what's this?
No, this is for something separate. Yeah.
Like I genuinely think he's not trying to just be obtuse. I genuinely think that they don't understand that Hispanic people can also be white supremacists. I think it breaks their brain somehow.
But that's because they're dumb.
No, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Well, and also it's funny that all of a sudden the change my mind smartest debaters in the entire world who are always right basically lose object permanence once under oath.
Yeah.
Basically become the dumbest people on the entire
Just
entire
can't
planet.
recall.
Not
Can't
a
recall.
single person on that team said, wait a minute, what if he's both Latino and a Nazi? Maybe the narrative, not to mention like the right guy who did the shooting, put that aside for a second. Like not a single person on the entire team thought that we should worry about that in case we get sued.
Yeah. Insane. All right, this is the last clip. I saw this on social media, and it's an old video of Milton Friedman, and it just really stuck out to me. And it's from 1999. He's speaking with the Hoover Institute's Peter Robinson about which government agencies he would keep and which ones he would abolish. And, you know, Milton Friedman is the economist that basically is the foundation of Republican thought from the neoliberal era on. And this is
Greenspan-inspired sort of guy, yeah.
Exactly. And he inspired many of like the governments around the world that looted their federal governments, their structures, and unleashed unfettered free market capitalism, which
Speaking of Pinochet.
Right. Which meant Pinochet is a great example, which meant you know, death squads in those instances, mass suppression of dissent,
A constitution that locks in the rights of the major property owners.
and was both violent, exacerbated income and wealth inequality, led to revolution. This is the vision that is currently being implemented by Musk and Trump. And so this is just a little lesson to leave folks with as our last clip of the day on Friday. What is old is new again.
Of the 14 cabinet departments. Now, 14 is a lot for television, so I want to just go right down the list quickly and have you give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Keep them or abolish them. Department of Agriculture.
Abolish.
Gone.
Oh,
Department of Commerce.
Abolish.
Gone. Department of Defense.
Keep.
Keep it. Department of Education.
Abolish.
Gone. Energy.
Abolish.
Housing.
Except that energy ties in with the military.
Well, then we shove it under defense.
That's
the little
right.
bit that handles the nuclear,
Right, that ought to go under
plutonium and so forth goes under defense, but we abolish the rest of it. Health and Human Services?
There is room for some public health activities to prevent contagion. Such a thing as, for example...
Okay, so you keep the National Institutes of Health, say, and the Center for Disease Control
not
down in
the
Atlanta?
National Institute.
Oh, no?
Those are mostly research agencies. No. That's a question of whether the government should be involved in financing research.
And the answer is no.
Well, that's a very complicated issue, and it's not an easy answer with respect to that.
We'll eliminate half of the Department of Health and Human
something
Services?
like that.
Okay, one half. There we go. Housing and Urban Development?
Out.
Oh, didn't even pause over that one. Department of the Interior?
Oh, well, but housing and urban development has done an enormous amount of harm. My God. If you
Keep going. 1999.
think of the way in which they've destroyed parts of cities under the rubric of eliminating slums.
Jack Kemp.
You know, you remember that Martin Anderson wrote a book on the federal bulldozer describing the effect of the urban development. There have been many more dwelling units torn down in the
All right, then that's good. I just wanted to get that part in about just the insanity about housing and urban development. By the way, since that year, just coincidentally, that was the year of the Faircloth Amendment, which barred under federal funding for public housing under Bill Clinton. And Friedmanomics took hold of the Democratic Party as well. We did, thankfully, get a bit of a departure to a more Keynesian style under Biden with like the antitrust stuff at the very least, but there's still way more to do. And you hear that, and is that not the exact agenda of Doge, right? Of what the Elon Musk folks are doing right now, and it's the same thing that informs this vision of you know, that he borrowed from Yarvin, which was Rage back in 2012 that he wrote about. Retire all government employees. The Doge thing is just a rebranded, rebooted version of what Friedman says, and then the methods that Yarvin encourages is basically autocracy to get what Milton Friedman's anarcho-capitalist utopia really looks like, which is just like, it's an Ayn Randian vision.
It's what we did to Chile.
Yeah.
In 1975, Friedman met with Pinochet to convince him that Chile's economy required shock treatment. It's kind of what's going on now, primarily in the form of drastic reduction in public spending. The general, Friedman noted, was sympathetically attracted to the idea of a shock treatment, but was clearly distressed at the possible temporary unemployment that might be caused. So Milton Friedman and his buddies said, hey, dictator, that's going to do massive amount of repression in Chile, don't worry so much about how harmed people are by the shock treatment. Quote, there is no way to end the inflation that will not involve a temporary transitional period. We saw how temporary that was. A temporary transitional period of severe difficulties, including unemployment.
Yep. And this was the Chicago School of Economics. You'll hear the reference to the Chicago boys frequently, and like, yes, they're the schools that they set up to teach Milton Friedman economics in Chile, so they could churn out a bunch of primed bureaucrats or like government workers and people who were going to be deployed to implement this agenda. I mean, doesn't this sound like what Trump has been doing with Project 2025, stacking the government with his own loyalists? So this is bringing shock therapy and Friedman economics domestically to the United States. And hopefully it educates folks about what we've done to the world. But we're in for a lot of pain right now because this is the chickens coming home to roost with the Friedman ideology. They've gotten power and they're committed to implementing it. And the Democrats have to respond with a vision that is not just like, okay, we'll keep liberal free market fundamentalism, but we'll still support gay rights and trans people and be anti-racist. Like, those things are good, but you see how neatly racism fits in with Friedman's vision. The way he goes off there about housing and urban development, that, wow, building housing in cities has made them worse? For who, Milton? For who?
George Orwell, I've come to the conclusion that it is futile to be anti-fascist while attempting to preserve capitalism. Fascism, after all, is only a development of capitalism, and the mildest democracy, so-called, is liable to turn into fascism when the pinch comes.
So,
one more from this Jacobin piece on Milton Friedman.
Sure.
For Friedman, Chile was not simply an economic miracle, which is like interesting to note because often these things are economics and politics are talked about as if they're completely non-overlapping areas. But here's what Friedman thinks. For Friedman, Chile was not simply an economic miracle. It was, quote, an even more amazing political miracle. Despite having facilitated a massive transfer of wealth to the rich, Friedman contended that by substituting market mechanisms for state control, the dictatorship had replaced control from the top with control from the bottom.
Right. I mean, that... I sent you this, Bradley, from John Gantz. Another thing that rhymes, just a little bit up in our the chat between the two of us. Another, just like thing about historical analogy, looking at these quotes about Mussolini. I tell you at once, we oppose with all our might socialization, state ownership, and collectivization. And as against this, we must reduce the state to its pure and simple judicial and political expression. The second quote is even better in this thread about Mussolini from him. The state ought not to be a producer, wrote Mussolini in July 1919. For whoever speaks of a state necessarily speaks of bureaucracy, and a bureaucracy is anti-productionist and parasitic by definition. And you talk about, liquidating political liberalism with its bourgeois values, etc. But I mean, that quote about bureaucracy, you could copy and paste it, and it could be a Doge press release. So what's comforting about having historical examples is that we know we can see and look at blueprints of how to fight it. But it is a good reminder that, there are rebrands and reboots But it's the same old story. The same old tactics.
That's what's also so funny about the tweet that Gans is quote tweeting, which is Senator Mike Lee saying "name a fascist dictator."
No, it's is that really him?
Oh, it's base Mike Lee. Yeah, that's actually him. Yeah. That's the senior senator from Utah. Name a fascist dictator whose agenda entailed limiting the size, cost, and power of government. As if it's never happened before.
The better question is name one who wasn't.
Yes.
This is from Pavel Wargun. Hitler, having received backing from Germany's major industrialists and oligarchs, took these policies even further. In 1934, he embarked on a major privatization agenda. The railways, public banks, public works projects, construction agencies, and steel plants would be turned over to private hands. Hitler implemented a profit guarantee and launched a major deregulation plan, eliminating rules on minimum wages and minimum working conditions. He cut aid to the homeless and then dispatched them to concentration camps. Interesting. That's probably something that's going to happen here too. Since these measures were opposed by unionists, Hitler sent his thugs to brutalize them. Union leaders too often ended up in the camps. The fiercest opponents of these measures, the communists, who wanted to see the means of production in workers' hands, were the primary targets. That is why the famous poem begins with the words, "First they came for the communists." And Pavel says, much of this is freely available and amply evidenced in the transcripts of the Nuremberg trials. At its most basic, fascism arises when the profit motive quashes the public good.
I didn't even think to even address that tweet that was quote tweeted because I thought there's no way that @based Mike Lee is actually the Senator Mike Lee, but I guess I'm not based enough to get it.
Bootlicker Mike Lee.
Yeah, pathetic. All right, guys, gonna read some IMs and then we'll get out of here. It's Friday. German left is shorter than the Orwell quote, but essentially saying the same. But who doesn't want to talk about capitalism shall also keep silent on fascism. Max Horkheimer. JJ says, please put a link to that Milton Friedman clip. We will. Mr. Melancholy, did you see Kanye's freak out on Twitter? He claimed he has dominion over his wife, plus a bunch of other stuff saying free P. Diddy and he's a Nazi. I didn't see it. He's boring at this point. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, his music sucks. Who cares?
Clearly has severe issues, but...
You should go hang out with Mark Robinson.
I don't like that, the way that, like, he parades his wife naked out there. I think it seems extremely exploitative and evil. I'm just going to put that out there.
And he's been doing that for a while now, too, yeah.
Yeah, there's a massive power differential, and it seems very abusive to me. He's a very dark person. I don't know what to say. He's lost his mind, and it sucks because, growing up in my age, there's, he was such an exciting, artist, but...
Yeah, Kendrick's better. Thanks, Rick Rubin, for all your influence on Kanye West.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Rick Rubin is the alt-right guy.
Right. Silly science people, hey guys, don't despair about audience numbers. I have at least 5 people I know don't stay up to date on some of these news stories, so I cite the show frequently. Your reach is further than your view count. Oh, we're not worried about it, but I appreciate it. I mean, I think...
Our views are fine.
Yeah, our views are doing fine. But I think maybe that's a reference to what I was saying just with Ben Dixon about just how much more money and resources the right does have. So we're doing our best here. Moodyapollis, the questioning in that clip is literally the meme from SpongeBob where Man Ray is trying to give Patrick his wallet. Yeah, it is. Really cool. They are arresting DACA recipients while international fugitive Bibi Netanyahu is standing right there. Yep. 10 lawn gnomes. Not sure if it's been brought up, but isn't Musk and the rest of his new doggy agency now subject to the Hatch Act preventing partisan activities while doing office work? Well, that would apply if they were actually, or official work, sorry, not office work. If they were going through any kind of formal procedure, but they're not. They're just doing whatever they want.
Law is... kind of sidelined right now, and it's been sidelined for over a year. What's the Leahy law? If you can just start ignoring the shit, it's going to be ignored.
We are in the shadow of the war on terror and the lack of accountability for that incredible crime. And I think that this national security state that was birthed from that is now being merged with our technology sector, and Trump. It's important, I think, to understand that moment and that shock and what what capitalists, what our government did to erode our rights in that period. And then it's, of course, as Matt has pointed out many times, the entirely inadequate reaction to the financial crash. It's all culminated in this moment.
If unionization rates were higher, Kamala would have won. Kamala won union folks by a bigger margin, union voters, by a bigger margin than did Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Thanks to people like Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter for thinking that there's actually probably too much labor power in this country. And they were speaking for a lot of professional liberals when they said stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. 5 more. Garrett from Nova. Emma, stop getting me so riled up. I'm watching on a plane and need to not end up on the no-fly list. Apologies. Safe travels. Eek. BRB forever. After the Oslo Accords, PM Yitzhak Rabin in his last speech before the Knesset called for the state of Israel alongside a Palestinian entity, an entity which is less than the state. He wanted to expand West Bank settlements and didn't accept Palestinian control of East Jerusalem, the proposed capital of Palestine. Israel has not at any point accepted the two-state solution. And today, the recognition of a Palestinian state is against the law in Israel. It's exactly right.
Yeah, it's a big lie to waste time so they can do more extermination and land grabbing.
Shrimpo Baranzan says Musk is reportedly buying a $40 million Super Bowl ad to show the waste they're eliminating.
You know, I hope Kendrick Lamar makes a little political statement.
Me too.
In the halftime show. Look, I want to hear, Not Like Us as much as anybody. He should do fuck Donald Trump. He should play fuck Donald Trump.
He should. I mean, he should. But artists, we didn't even did the update. Did you guys see that Chappell Roan, that she did that speech about the at the Grammys about giving healthcare to their artists and treating them better. And the Hollywood Reporter, a billionaire, immediately after one artist called them out publicly, took out an opinion piece about how wrong she is and how messed up she is, and dragged Halsey into it. And she went out and defended her. I mean, this says everything, right? So more artists need to use their power like this. Yeah, this was, I know, I don't want to keep you guys here too long. It's Friday, but yeah, so Jeff Rabban put out an op-ed. Yeah, so maybe we'll cover that on Monday.
A Zionist billionaire, interesting.
Oh, that's him? Oh.
I mean, sounds like it.
Who is you? We can't build ducking, I think you meant fucking infrastructure or houses domestically in the U.S. How the fuck are we going to rebuild Gaza when we can't do any of this at home?
Also, I like the party that wants to build a wall to keep refugees out, wondering why, Jordan and Egypt just don't take 1 million people displaced against their will.
Mr. Feeney, ironically, Gerald strikes me as one of those guys who would rock a long sleeve shirt with tribal tattoos printed on the sleeves. And the final I am of the day.
I know who this Jeff Rabban is.
He's been on Ben Shapiro's show before.
Gotcha.
No worries.
Okay, so I was right. Maybe not a billionaire, though.
The other roster, the Chicago Boys are well named. The only other group I think when I hear that are fucking... the only other group I think of when I hear that are fucking gangsters. Yep, well said.
That's who runs it. That's who runs it.
Gangster capitalism. All right,
Trump
guys.
Trump is a gangster. Trump is a criminal.
Yep.
Who has exploited undocumented labor to build hotels. And he's aware of that. And he knows that, that's how this shit works. And he's under no jeopardy in talking about, American workers and la, 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 la. He's under no jeopardy of taking heat about it.
Exactly. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. We will see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get